So I've been thinking a lot about the world right now, about the comment sections and various videos and the absolute cesspool that has become our social media. I'm usually an optimist and I like to find the good in history, but lately I look at the division, the identity politics, the anger, the way we just rip each other apart over everything. I feel like I'm standing in front of a house fire with a squirt gun saying, be nice to each other, show a little respect. Feels kind of futile at times. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. But that's the job of the historian, to look back and realize that we aren't the first ones to feel like this. We aren't the first people to live in a broken world. You go back 2,000 years to the first Christmas. The world was at peace, technically. The Roman Emperor Augustus had closed the gates of Janus, the big temple doors in Rome that stayed open during times of war. He slammed them shut. He built the Ara Pacis, the altar of peace. He was even called Son of God and Savior of the world in imperial propaganda. But let's be honest about that peace. It was a peace enforced at the point of a sword. It was the Pax Romana. It was a peace of silence, not of wholeness or completeness. It was a peace where if you spoke up, you got silenced. It was a peace where order was maintained by fear. And sometimes when I scroll through Twitter or I watch the news, it feels like that's the only kind of peace we know how to make today. We try to silence the other side to get some quiet. And that brings me to the word I want to share with you this Christmas. It's shalom. We translate it as peace, but it's such an inadequate English word to describe what that word means. Peace just means that the kids aren't screaming and guns aren't firing at each other. But in Hebrew, the root word is shin lamed mem, SLM. It implies something so much deeper than just a lack of violence. Think of a stone wall. In the ancient world, a wall was only shalem, whole, if every stone was perfectly fitted. There weren't any gaps. If there was a breach in the wall, you didn't just cover it up. You didn't just declare everything to be okay. You had to rebuild it. You had to pay the cost to quarry a new stone and make it fit. And here's the kicker. There's a verb form, shalem, which means to pay, to make restitution. You see, in the ancient mind, you couldn't have peace until the debt was fully paid, until the missing brick was brought and put back in its place. You see, peace isn't free. It costs us something. It costs forgiveness. It costs letting go of the need to have the last word. It costs not having to always be right or winning the argument. It's about just structural integrity, not just I want quiet. There's a story from the Civil War that I think illustrates this beautifully. In December of 1862, and the aftermath of the Battle of Fredericksburg, which was just a meat grinder, thousands of dead men for no gain, their bodies freezing in the mud. Union and Confederate armies after the battle are dug in on opposite sides of the Rappahannock River. Some called it the Bloody Chasm. But on one of those cold nights, a Union band started playing. They struck up Yankee Doodle. And from the Union side, a cheer went up, a roar of defiance. Across the river, the Confederates heard that. So their band struck up Dixie, and the rebel yell echoed back across the water. It was a battle of the bands, music used as a weapon in place of the violence of the battlefield. Just another way to say, hey, we're here and we still hate you. But then something happened. One of the bands, and historians argue about which one started it, began to play Home Sweet Home. And then the other band joined in. The yelling stopped. The jeering stopped. And suddenly thousands of men on both sides began to sing. Frank Mixon was a private in the 1st South Carolina, and he wrote about that night. He said, quote, I do believe that had we not had the river between us, that the two armies would have gone together and settled the war right there and then. Another soldier, John Paxton from the 140th Pennsylvania, wrote, "We had bridged the river, spanned the bloody chasm. We were brothers, not foes. The Christ child struck a truce of us, broke down the wall of partition, and became our peace." Of course, it wasn't the only time in history that something like that happened. In fact, that same December, a similar story broke out near the Stones River battlefield. But fast forward 50 years to the trenches of World War I, the most famous of Christmas truce stories happens in 1914. You have the British and the Germans dug in the mud of Flanders. The machine guns are set. The snipers are watching. And then Germans start putting little trees, Tannenbaum, on the edge of their trenches. They start to sing Stille Nacht, Silent Night. The British hear it, and instead of firing, they sing back. And slowly, terrified men climb out of the trenches into no man's land. This was the killing zone. This was where you went to die. This is where many of your buddies had died. But for a time, it became a field of friendship. They exchanged gifts. They kicked a ball around. They showed photos of their loved ones. But most importantly, they helped each other bury their dead. They restored dignity to the bodies that had been lying out in no man's land. They restored shalom, wholeness, to the very earth that had been torn apart. The generals hated it. They commanded the artillery to start firing again to drown out the carols, because they knew that if men started seeing each other as shalem, as whole human beings, they couldn't keep killing each other anymore. So here's my wish for you, for all of us. I don't wish you the peace of an echo chamber where everyone agrees with you and the algorithm feeds you exactly what you want to hear. That's the peace of Augustus. It's fake and it's fragile. I wish you instead shalom. I wish you the wholeness that comes from realizing the world is wide enough for you and the person next to you who thinks differently, who believes differently, who looks differently than you do. But remember the word shalem. Peace implies payment. If we want wholeness in our families, in our comment sections, in our communities, in our countries, someone has to pay the price. Someone has to absorb the cost. Someone has to say, I won't fire back. Someone has to play Home Sweet Home while the other side is playing a war march and jeering. So I want to invite you to take a break this week. Seriously, the way a lot of people like to say it is touch grass. Get off the internet. Spend time with your family. Build the wall of your own life back up, brick by brick. Pay the debt of forgiveness you owe to the people around you. My prayer for all of us is an old rabbinic blessing. May you be whole in body, whole in your finances, and whole in your soul. May you find the peace that doesn't just silence the noise, but actually heals the wound. We'll be back to regular history content soon enough. But for now, shalom, my friends. Merry Christmas.